Welcome back to the OTB podcast, the original and still the best New Zealand mountain bike podcast. We are stoked to announce that we have Maxxis Tyres joining the show, and what a better way to kick off our new partnership than with an episode with ex-Maxxis racing rider John Kirkcaldie. JK is an absolute legend of the downhill scene here in New Zealand and spent 6 years with the Maxxis racing team in the US, where he claimed his 2 Norba titles. From the Aspen to the wet scream and everything in between, Maxxis is New Zealand's tyre of choice. Keep your eyes peeled and make sure you listen to have a chance at scoring some fresh Maxxis rubber over the coming year. And don't forget to subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode on your feed. You can also help keep the show alive via Patreon if it suits you. Tell a friend, keep us growing. On to the show.
Nice. Very nice. Front and back. Leader's garment. Quite happy.
It's alright, isn't it? Looks pretty good in that bad boy.
Excellent, I think the word you're looking for is... Look at that thing. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? Beautiful.
Now, only if you're ready for this.
Alright, we are back on the OTB podcast, and this is definitely an episode, when I started this podcast 3 years ago, that has been on my mind ever since, but I knew that was not one that I wanted to do online. I knew I needed to be in person and talking to him. I mean, the man here, multi-time New Zealand champ, 2-time Norba champ, and just an absolute legend of New Zealand downhill, and definitely was the biggest inspiration for me to go racing internationally. John Kirkcaldie, stoked to have you on, mate.
Hey Kieran, yeah, definitely stoked to be catching up with you. First time I've done something like this, so yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think we have some legends that have, been around from the days before any of this sort of media stuff, existed. So it's kind of where I want to get in and get a few of these stories, because I think people find them super intriguing, especially the listener base we have. I think are definitely still in the, they remember the JK era very well. So it's cool to get some tales.
Yeah, it's sort of a shame that I miss social media, but then there's probably a lot of benefits too, because I think I was fairly professional, but also a bit rough at times.
I think there's definitely times where there's pluses and minuses of us missing that kind of real social media age for sure.
Yeah, I think personally for our social lives it was a good thing, but yeah, sponsorship wise, the social media has taken things I think to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's changed the sport through a lot of different aspects, hasn't it? So I guess probably, the biggest thing for me is going back into the history books. Really, I'd want to dive in, pick your brains on years at Foes, Schwinn, going into Rocky Mountain and Maxxis, and yeah, I guess probably the first question, start right at the start. Where did mountain biking begin for you?
Well, it really actually began for a short stint when I was about 11 years old. So it was, I think, late 80s. I'd had a BMX prior to that, never really raced BMX. Well, I never did one BMX race as a kid, but just spent a lot of time at the Taupo BMX track, just hucking jumps and trying to beat all the kids that did race and practice nights and stuff, and just was a bit of a hood rat really, and rode up there. And then mountain bikes came along, and lucky enough that my parents got a bike for me, and I did some local XC races, and that was really only lasted for about 2 years. And then my grandfather's trust sent me to the boarding school that my father went to and my grandfather went to, and that's Wanganui Collegiate.
You've been a few people win Masters and Eddie Masters through there as well.
Yeah, that's right. So so I boarded there, and then it just wasn't doable to ride mountain bikes, and it wasn't really cool, and it was that was 1990. So I just conformed and ran athletics and played rugby with my 2 sports, and I was never that great at rugby, but I made the first 15 just because I didn't care, and I would just tackle anyone.
Just run it straight.
Yeah, I would just hit people tackling, and was sort of fearless, but I was pretty average. I think pretty crap with the ball in hand. But I still had good times with that first 15 stuff, and then running was pretty good for me, and I think that taught me how to train hard.
It's probably a good way to kind of create that discipline, I guess, of what you can put your body through.
Yeah, we got pushed pretty hard because my events were 400 and 800, so they're pretty sort of sprint till you vomit sort of events, and that did help me big time when I started mountain biking.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of the training kind of, especially when you go into downhill, is that same sort of just max effort sprints. So you'd be already accustomed to it.
Yeah, I was, and so I grabbed a mountain bike right after leaving school, and it just happened by a little bit by chance. I was working at Hooker Jet in Taupo.
Yeah.
First summer holidays out of school, and the boat drivers were into their mountain biking, and they said, "Come to Rotorua," and this is back early days when the Big Dipper was actually something cool. and you were in that original part of the forest, and they lent me a bike from a friend, and I just like blew them all away, and I was gone, and they were like, and I was doing things, and they thought, man, they just said, you got to get into it. And so that kicked me off, and I was right into it from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's sort of early
that was
90s.
94.
Okay.
94.
So you were racing World Cups by like 95 though?
No, not quite that quick. 95. So I went to the US. My dad was in the US, lived in the US, and he had a little boat yard, and I went there just to work for him before coming. The plan was to come back and go to design school actually.
Okay.
And went to the US to work for him, and then straight away bought a bike. Lived in a town, pretty nice town, Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I was going to say you spent a lot of time in Santa Barbara, didn't you?
So that had just right on the back of town. It went from ocean, from beautiful beach and just big foothills. But these foothills were big, and there were 15, 20-minute rocky descent runs up there.
I remember some videos like the days of, I think you were on a Schwinn maybe, and you're just like these rugged, big, rocky trails. So
yeah, and that definitely, like, I think my strengths were dry rocky as opposed to European sort of grassy, more so like steep fall line. That's definitely my riding came from that background of riding that rock in Santa Barbara. So that first year I just entered myself into amateur races. There was a strong series at Big Bear, which is Snow Summit. So they had, and then you went to a few nationals, and I went beginner, won the races, and then I think it was called the one class after beginner might have been intermediate. I think won that race, then put myself an expert, and then was straight away in the mix. And so I just did that the first year, and then came home to New Zealand after that first year then, and went to the national series. And I turned up at the Mount DH, and no one had even seen or heard of me before. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, I guess because you'd kind of built all of a sudden this, like, you'd kind of honed all your skills overseas, which is like kind of quite an oddball way for a Kiwi. Yeah,
and the scene was pretty strong here back then, and that's when I first met a character, Rico.
Oh yeah, Rico.
That was his nickname.
Dean Rogers.
Dean Rogers, and he was actually a very talented, and still is a talented bike rider. And a friend of his, Jason Yeldon.
I remember that name. Yeah. What bike were you on that first year? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was on a when that race I was on a Cannondale, which had like a carbon rear end. It had that tiny little air shock in the back of it.
I think I remember those ones. Yeah.
And I had sourced in California a Mr. Dirt triple clamp fork.
Yeah, I remember those too.
Prior to the triple clamp fork, it had like this little wee shock under the
the head shock. Yeah.
And at Mammoth, at Kamikaze, I'd done a run, and it had just detonated inside, and it was only really held together by bits.
Must be making a horrific noise.
Oh, you just see that the bikes made horrific noises anyway, so you're just hard to notice. So I had this triple clamp on, and funny story is I just was bombing the hardest line possible on the mount, and the practice day, and then got to the bottom, and someone said, "Oh, your fork's bent," and I'd like bent it right back, like it had bent it back a couple of inches, and luckily a local panel beater, oh man, I'm terrible, like right now, his name has slipped my mind, helped me out hugely. We went to his workshop, and we straightened the fork ready for racing the next day.
And like a hydraulic press or something?
They were steel lowers. They were steel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Won the race the next day, pulled a manual over the finish line, looped out, ripped all the skin off my ass.
What a way to finish. It was Glenn Siserich in that around at that stage?
He was, he was. So, and that was the beginning of that sort of like rivalry.
Bit of a rivalry there.
Yeah. And so and then I went on and did the national series, and Darren Henderson won that summer. But I was like battling and trying to compete with him, but I still had pretty skinny legs at that stage.
Because Hendy, he's probably one of the guys who has won a lot of national races, but unfortunately, again, one of those ones that's lost in history because he was pretty dominant through those early years.
Definitely, yeah. I think 93, 94, 95. So then so I was coming through, he was sort of finishing. And then the following year after that first Nationals, I went back to the US. But during that Nationals, I sort of jumped ahead. After the Mount race, I was like, this bike just doesn't cut it anymore. But I contacted and got to know Alistair Heine from Blue Shark. And
a legend of the New Zealand mountain bike scene.
Yep, for sure. And he was racing back then as well. And so I bought a Foes from him. I think I put the Mr. Dirt triple clamp fork on it.
That would have been a Foes Weasel probably in those days.
Was a Foes Weasel. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was a yellow frame. It was like tube frame one, not the monocoque.
I think I have a picture of you with that bike somewhere on my phone. I've seen it recently. From maybe did you race that bike the following year?
I raced it at the very beginning over in the US.
I think I'm sure I'll have to dig it up and confirm with you, and I'll have to post it up if it is. But I've got this picture of you that I found somewhere randomly, and I've screenshot it on my phone for this exact reason.
Oh, that would be classic to see that. Yeah. So that bike did the National Series, had a great time, just bummed rides around with friends and got to know people.
Yeah.
And met some great friends back then. Kev Walton, Rotorua local. Got to know Kev back then. Kev helped me out hugely with a clapped out old dirt bike I'd bought. And helped fixing stuff for me with that. And then Bob Tuxford and crew from
I remember that
from
name
Auckland.
as well. Yeah, it's like this is before me, but I do remember some of these names.
Yes. That series was fun, and then went back to the US, and then basically just back then you could just put yourself in pro.
Yeah.
If you felt you were good enough, put myself in pro for the Norbas, and then just worked out. I was still working, but I'd got a new job, and I was working building. The products called Corian bench tops.
Oh, okay.
It's like engineered stone bench tops. Probably lucky I only did them for one summer, but I think that pretty toxic for the body. But so I had a really good boss because I met him up on the trails, and he was an avid mountain biker.
Oh, perfect.
So I said, hey, I got to go for 2 months, and he's like, okay, we'll see you in 2 months.
Yeah. So that was 96.
96, and I just bummed rides across the US. I think the first big ride that I bummed were a ride where the team was they've been in social media a little bit lately. They helped out. His name's Mark Rogers.
Oh, the Crank Pro Team.
Crank Pro Team. Yeah, Crank Brothers.
They did helmets and things like that.
Crank, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mark's actually a listener of the podcast.
Great.
So,
okay, well, hey,
hopefully
Mark.
he listens.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. And Shams March, a friend of mine from Santa Barbara. And Shams has got a big history in the US.
Yeah, massive.
So we tripped across the country and just got around the Norbas as best I could, and did anything I could to get to the races. And towards the end of that season, my results were pretty good straight away. I was top 20ing most races, and then I was building into top 10. And by the last couple of races, I think like Deer Valley and Mammoth, I was well in the top 10 and not on the podium, but 6th, 7th, 8th, and I was beating the Foes riders.
Yeah.
And so then,
was this like were the Leduc brothers on there at that point,
No,
or is it still, they were a bit younger, aren't they?
yeah, they're younger. So that was the next stage of Foes team riders. But this was Darren Stockton.
Oh yeah, he's a legend of the
yes,
US.
and he was an ex-pro roadie.
Yeah.
And still, by all means, a great bike rider. But he was strong and powerful.
Yeah.
And the tracks back then were still in that phase of you needed to be strong to be competitive.
Yeah.
Those US tracks like Kamikaze, it's crazy fast, but it's got one horrendous climb in it near the bottom. And if you don't have any strength, you get smoked.
Yeah, you lose more time on the climbs than you're ever going to make on the downhills. So.
Yeah, because that end of that season, I got a wild card entry into Reebok Eliminator, which was such a cool
it was a huge event from those days. Like, again, it's kind of before my time, but I just remember bits and pieces from footage of that. Like, it looked crazy.
ESPN TV, the choppers would pick you up at the bottom and chop you back to the top, and then the chopper would fly beside you while you're racing.
Because there was a dual race, wasn't it?
It was a dual,
yeah.
And so there were tricks like I rode well, and then I got a lucky chance, and I got through to the final, and I raced a top American racer back then, Jeremy Purdy, and he was an ex-ski racer as well.
Oh, right.
But I led all the way to the bottom, and then in the climb at the at the base, he just outgassed me.
Yeah.
Horsepower, he was gone. But it was an interesting race. You would drag your foot coming into the corners so you could kick up these big softball-sized rocks at the guy behind you.
It's funny that I remember reading you. I remember reading that in an interview or something like years ago. You was talking about doing that, and that stuck with me forever. I've always remembered you saying that, like just dragging your foot, kicking up dust and rocks, and
Yeah, because we had a few downhill manias. I did a few of those, and that was 4 up.
yeah,
And-
Big Bear.
And and it was the early days. I did some, and then it went away for a long time, and then they brought it back for a few races. And I used that trick actually again in that at Big Bear.
That's amazing. So that '96 season, you were on a foes, but you weren't actually on the team.
No, but in Brent sort of, I suppose, unofficially picked me up at the very last 2 races, and so I stayed with the team in Deer Valley, Utah, and Mammoth.
Okay.
Stayed with the team, and the riders were Darren Stockton, Katrina Miller
Yeah,
from Australia.
from Australia. Yeah.
And I think it might have just been those 2. But so then Darren moved on the next season to another team, and then I became the Foes rider. And Brent Foes and Laurie's his wife, they never had a lot of money. They were just small.
He was just
grass-
a
he was
passionate racer. Like,
Yeah.
he just loved racing.
fabricator, like still built a lot of the bikes.
Yeah.
And so I lived the following season. They put up accommodate. I basically lived at their home in Pasadena.
Did you live in
California.
the attic at the like in the?
No, I didn't.
Maybe it was different. I don't know whether it was the same house, but yeah, when I lived there, well, same thing. Years
Yeah.
later, I ended up living there, and we lived in their like attic thing upstairs.
Yeah, so that there was actually a lady renting that space. I lived
Okay.
in the front room, but yeah, a few years later, that's where Matt Whitaker, Dog
Yep.
Boy, and his wife Alice. That's where they live. They spend a lot of time living in the attic. But so the workshop was behind the house, and that's where all the bikes were built. And I did jobs from just like running frames to the heat treater.
Yeah. I think that's just been. It was like a Kiwi tradition in those days because we did the same thing. I'd be like running CNC machines and stamping frame halves and straightening frames on the jig bench and
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's pretty cool that and they would we would, I think we ate out most meals.
Yeah.
It was just the
yeah, same.
yeah. Good memories of doing training, riding the road bike to the Rose Bowl.
You never rode road bikes there. We used to ride. There's this one trail kind of up in the hills behind their place. We used to ride that pretty much every morning. We'd go out on the cross country bikes and just go do the loop of that before it got too hot. But it's cool spot.
Yeah, so that was the way they could sponsor me that year, and that was 90.
Should be like
97.
Yeah, 97.
97. Really basic setup from memory. I'm pretty sure Jason Yeldon came over and joined me for a few races towards the end of the season, and we just had a van that we would drive to the races. And the following year, there was a little bit more support, and Brent was able to pay me, I think that first year, I think it was support and 10K.
Yeah.
And I was living at their home.
And you're sitting there going 10K, like, holy shit,
Yeah.
I've made it.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid to race a bike.
Exactly, yeah. So then the results I just was consistently in the top 10 at the Norbas, and I think I had a podium that year, maybe a podium or two, but it would have been 4ths or 5ths.
Yeah.
Just did random World Cups that I could that were in the US, so Mont Saint Anne, race Mont Saint Anne just about every year. And was involved with the Leaf Spring bike, the prototypes.
That was one of the ones I was going to ask if you ever rode that bike.
And I did, and I raced it at St Anne, but the issue was chain guides, dropping. We'd have chain issues, so I think blew some great runs, or could have been great runs at St Anne with dropping the chain or getting it blocked up, and it was probably also my fault because you just can never back. You should never backpedal. And just when you're in that race run mentality and backpedaling, or and
Pops
you just
it off.
Yeah.
Did that Leaf Spring bike weigh a ton? I mean, bikes were heavy at that point anyway.
It was pretty heavy. Yeah, it was heavy, but because on the right track, because it was heavy, it stuck to the ground.
Yeah. I think foes were always pretty good with the sticking to the ground part, so that thing must have been a whole nother level with that weight behind it.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, you would have been. Yeah, you were well and truly pre-Kernut days, though.
I was, yeah, I was. And so that after that pretty good year that I had, I then got offered a contract by Schwinn factory, or French Schwinn Toyota, that's what it was called at that stage. And Brent couldn't really offer me much more money. And this is where I feel one sort of mistake in my career is I took the money, and it wasn't a huge amount of money, but I took the factory team and the money over staying with less money and a better bike.
Yeah. And because you went and basically did a full World Cup season that year with Schwinn as
That
well,
was
didn't
the
you?
only ever my only full World Cup season actually.
And Dave Cullinan is teammate.
Dave Cullinan, yeah.
Cully, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he's a nice guy, interesting guy. Full California.
Yeah.
He couldn't ride in the rain. Hated it in the rain.
There's been a few of those come through out of the US, I think, over the years.
Yeah, very talented slalom rider. Yeah, so then Shams was my teammate.
Oh, yeah, of course, Shams was on there too.
Yeah, Marla Streb Yeti was sort of linked to the team.
Because they were basically using a, were they a Yeti or were they, because it was that Lorwell 4-bar.
Yep, Mert Lorwell,
Yep.
design. The pull shock where you'd blow the spring off the end of the shock.
Yeah, I can't imagine that lasted too long.
Yeah, I didn't gel with that bike at all.
Yeah, I guess that's always one of those classics, I guess at that point you're probably going, well, like I'm doing pretty good here with the US racing. I've got this better deal to go race World Cups, and I guess you're always kind of like going, looking to the sky. And
yeah, and I did come to grips with the bike, but then we had a shocker year and it was actually Shimano were ripping pedals out of cranks.
Yeah.
And so like that blew 2 race runs, a really good one at Caproon.
Yeah.
Like one of the last big ski jumps and ripped the pedal out and massive crash. And yeah, it's another one another one in Canada somewhere, I forget that, in near Montreal. But yeah, it was a tough year. I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I remember a Mammoth actually on like a real hot run and then clipping a pedal and just going in for end. And I'd put so much pressure on myself throughout the season. I was just at the bottom of the hill. I just fully broke down. I was just completely, it nearly pushed me out of the sport because I'd put so much pressure on myself.
Yeah, at that point, I guess it's difficult because you kind of all of a sudden feel like, well, I'm on this big World Cup team. I mean, Schwinn was, a big deal at that point.
Yeah.
You've probably felt so much pressure to perform and carry on
and
from
I
there.
trained really hard. Like I was training 2-3 times a day.
Yeah.
Like I went into that season super prepared.
And I guess it would have been a 1-year deal as well.
It was just
so
a 1-year
you're
deal.
like, if I don't perform,
Yep.
yeah. And it
exactly.
only gets worse as you get through the season if you haven't been having good results, thinking like, shit, what comes next?
Yeah, exactly. I think I finished 13th overall at the World Cups that season, even with a lot of issues.
Yeah.
It was around there. I know I was a few
That's still
top
a
10s.
solid season for, having issues and not gelling super well. So
Yeah, I was exactly. There were a lot of. I mean, there are a lot of mechanicals and woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
But that's downhill, right?
yes,
it's so
I think
tough.
everyone's got that through their
Yep.
career at some point. So
Yeah, it's sort of almost not worth bringing those stories up because you go, every good rider has got them. It's just what makes the difference between a good rider and a great rider are the ones that can consistently put it together.
yeah. So yeah, that would have been. I was always curious about that because I had known that it was your only full World Cup season, so I was sort of always interested whether that was just like because of the deal, that was why. But I mean, like you say, I think your strength always worked in those US tracks, so it's probably a bit of why you kind of stayed. And you were there at the right time when there was money and support to make a career out of racing in the US alone.
That's right, and it's just I sort of went, well, I tried the big pressure and the big team, and I don't think it worked for me.
Yeah.
After Schwinn came back to New Zealand, just bought another Foes or got another Foes. I don't know how, somewhere, probably Al.
Picked
probably
up one
helped
from
me out.
Al or something, yeah.
And did the national series, had fun. Tripped around with Rico and another friend, Hayden Barney.
Oh yeah, I remember Barney. Yeah.
And just had some fun. And then I got, it's sort of, I don't know, I can't remember how it came about.
Because
but
you
I
were
got-
living in Wellington those days, weren't you?
Yes, that's right. And then I got an offer from Rocky Mountain, which
Always been curious about the Rocky Mountain deal. It
Yeah.
seems like such a left field.
It did seem, it was really left field, but it was actually an amazing year because it was just myself and a cross country racer.
Jeff Kabush, was he?
No,
Nah,
it
he was a bit
wasn't.
later.
It was, pretty sure it was Aussie guy. Man, I'm terrible. I should have done some research. On
So you were the only downhill racer on the team.
Yeah, one mechanic, and
Crazy.
it was so low key.
Yeah.
We always seem to have good accommodation. I came home. I was actually doing some working with Rico or for him. He was a roofer, and we were working for Darren Henderson.
Oh yeah.
So I needed to check out from the seriousness.
Yeah.
So I was doing some roofing, riding a lot of moto, or trying to learn how to ride a moto because we're pretty hopeless back then. But doing lots of moto and partying downtown in Wellington.
just taking a break.
Yeah, still early 20s. And then got the Rocky Mountain ride, and I did skip a huge part actually. At the end of that Schwinn season, winning that place on the Sprite ad.
Oh, that was one we had to come up with because I'd heard rumors of the Sprite ad that it ended up in the Super Bowl or something.
It played actually throughout all of the finals of the NBA finals.
Oh right.
I don't think it was Super Bowl.
But it was obviously in a prime time spot.
It was prime time spots, and so what they did is they were just looking for a mountain biker, and they were looking for a certain look. And there was always this annual race at Glen Helen it was the mountain bikers moto race. And they went through the pits, and they were just getting us to. They were just basically doing there's the word for it, but they were like auditions.
Yeah, I can't think of what it is, but
cold calling auditions.
Yeah.
And I had like white bleached hair. All my tips were all bleached and all sort of shaggy hair when I actually had hair back then. And they got me back. I was with Darren Stockton actually, and he did a bit of. Like Hollywood ad stuff and small part stuff, and we had gone to the race together, and he said to me, they said, can you come to Hollywood tonight and do come and have another interview? And he said to me, you jump on this, like go straight there. And so he was really good about it. We went straight there and did it, and they liked me, and they ended up casting me for this role. So it was full Hollywood filming up in the mountains behind LA. And you can look it up now. I think it's called Sprite, like Rough Ride.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to go search this up afterwards.
Yeah, it's online. You can find it.
Yeah,
and that was an amazing experience. Like full crew, like food trucks, and I mean there would have been like 100 people.
Just filming your one part.
So just like drinking the Sprite, and then you'd have me like bombing different runs, and then they're like, does Sprite make you a better mountain biker?
Yeah.
And then have me like launching off a jump, and then like they used a stuntman actually and ragdolled down down the slope, like flip flopping down. Bike
You're like,
flying.
hey, for a bit extra, like I can do the crashing as well if you need. Like,
I probably should have. Stuntman was actually pretty good. Yeah,
they're pretty skilled at what they do.
Yeah.
So that the rumor I'd heard was that you'd made $200,000 out of it, but I don't think that was quite that much.
No, it wasn't. So Rocky Mountain was a pretty basic deal. I think it was around 10 or 15,000 US plus support to do the Norbas.
Yeah, travel and expenses and all that. And
and through with the ad, I think I made about 25,000 US.
It's a pretty good payday from doing an ad.
For like 4 days work.
Yeah.
And I got medical insurance out of it because you have to become a member of the Screen Actors Guild.
Oh yeah.
For them to pay you.
Yep.
And it was actually really helpful, and that medical insurance I held on to for a couple of years afterwards.
That'd be bit of extra in your back pocket while you're racing in the US, especially over there.
It was huge. And so that really helped. And then the New Zealand dollar was weak at that time, so I was converting it, 50 cents to the dollar, and it was great.
Yeah, that's a solid payday. Actually, one thing was Schwinn like a big money deal, or was that more of like low money, but you're going to race World Cups kind of thing?
It was no. So I got 35,000 US for that year, and there were some decent bonuses. Shams was on 80,000 US.
Oh yeah,
and that's really just because they thought he was going to be the next big thing, and I think he had some bad injuries. Yeah, some things went the wrong way for him, but he did well at a couple of World Cups.
Well, I think like Shams as well. He was like the first kind of high profile African American mountain biker. Yeah. So I guess for those guys it would have been like here's a really big profile potentially coming.
And
but
here's something to just throw in there, like because I raced for a few years with John Tomac.
Yeah,
he was finishing his career. He said to me one day, and John's a nice guy, but he said to me, you'll and he didn't say this in a bad way, but he was just saying, you'll never earn the money like the Americans will earn because this is our series, this is our country.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he said it in a bad way. He didn't say it in a bad way, but he was just, and that's very true.
I think it's the patriotism side of
It
things.
is
Like
the
Americans,
yeah.
they're going to look after the Americans, and
for
yeah, like I
sure.
mean, I found that as well with stuff I was on. You know, it's like the guys I was racing with, I was beating in results, but they were getting paid more because
Yeah.
they were their friends, they were Americans, and
Yeah, that's right, and maybe a bit more marketable. So where was I going with that? And that's probably a bit of the Shams thing too.
Yeah.
But he was drawing attention as well.
Mm.
You know, like he was a real character and had a big following. But so yeah, that year was again never made any big money, unfortunately. But I think still grateful when you convert it back to New Zealand dollars.
yeah. I
it's
think for
okay.
those for those seasons though, it's like at that kind of dollar value, it's it probably converts reasonably well, especially if you look at it compared to today's money. Like I've got an idea of kind of salaries these days, and I think there's a lot of guys who are riding for next to nothing.
Yeah,
So
I think
it's
it's the issue has always been, and it's probably the same now, is that there's good money you're at the very top,
Yep.
and it drops off really quickly.
Very quick.
Yeah, it's not a really sort of a steady curve. It's a really sharp curve, and that's the bummer about it, because there's lots of good riders that probably struggle to make a reasonable living for what you're having to do.
Yeah. And I think the thing that people overlook as well is that, kind of gone a bit off topic, but it's, people look at it as just going, well, they earn money, but at the end of the day, it's like if you're going to be competing, racing a full World Cup series, you can't be working at the same time. You've got to dedicate everything, and you're putting your body on the line, and there's a lot more than just you getting paid to ride a bike. Like, you've got to invest it.
Yeah, and especially now because the speeds are higher, the bikes are more capable. I mean, yes, there were bad injuries in our day, but they weren't as bad as they are now.
I don't think so. I just don't think the speeds were where they're at now.
No, that's right, they weren't.
You couldn't ride the bikes. You physically couldn't ride the bikes at that pace.
You just topped out at a speed, you know, and you're all competing hard against each other, but the bikes could only go so fast.
Yeah. So, speaking of that, I mean, coming back around to the Rocky Mountain thing, I mean, that bike, I never rode one, but they, to put it, they looked pretty shit.
Yeah.
They looked very flexy. You had a Monster T on that thing.
Yeah, a Monster T, and that worked well. It was heavy, but so what I did is it was really flexy in the back end. So I actually put a 24 on the rear.
Right, because that was like the RM9, wasn't it?
Yeah, RM9, and we had lots of frames in the trailer.
Yep.
I had an awesome mechanic.
Yeah.
I was cracking them like every round, or crack a couple of them around. And the pressure thing on the mechanic is he would find cracks right before a final. And have to rebuild a whole another frame, in a couple of hours. Putting the 24 on and then running like a big oversized tyre that was called a Gazalotti.
Yeah, the Nokian, the 3-inch Gazalottis.
3-inch Gazalotti in the back. So that would just, I wouldn't lose too much rolling, but I would get a stronger rear end.
Yeah.
Less flex. And I just was so relaxed, and I had trained but not trained as hard as I had the year before, and mentally I just went out and just had fun, and I was on the podium just about every weekend that year on that bike, and then was leading the series into Mammoth, and then let the pressure get to me, and I tucked the front in the sandy kiddie litter, and all I had to do was get, I think, 4th on the day, or 5th. I'd qualified fastest, blew it, came down 13th, and didn't win the title, and it went to Eric Carter.
I thought you did win the title in 2000.
No, not. It was 2001, 2002.
I had it backwards. Yeah, because I always thought you'd won the title on Rocky, and I was always like really amazed that like you'd kind of come out on this bike that probably wasn't the best race bike, but right.
Yeah, no, I totally blew it, and like financially wise too, it's crazy. I mean, at the time I would have been absolutely gutted, but you move on. But that would have probably been, I went on and got a contract from Maxxis, I think for $35,000 US plus expenses and everything, or 40,000, but that possibly could have been 60 to 70.
Yeah, coming in with that title could have been much bigger.
80, but it's that's life.
Yeah. So that was, I mean, the Maxxis team at that point, so this is coming into 2001, which, I mean, really like that kind of 2000, 2001, I mean, even through to sort of like 03, 04 is like that real peak of that US kind of Norba series, I think. You look at it, you look at results still even from then, and you've got Petey and guys like that coming over. You had this contingent of the Nathan Rennies and the Kavariks and that who were just coming out storming as well. And
Yeah, and like the World Cup, a lot of like at some of the rounds there was Petey, Nico, Cedric, our other top World Cup riders at those Norba rounds, and I was still podiuming. I was on the podium with them.
yeah,
Wasn't winning them, but I was in the mix with them at those Norba rounds. Deer Valley, and I remember I stood on a couple of podiums with Nico.
yeah,
And that was in his heyday.
yeah. I mean, when he was just absolutely dominant.
Yeah. So it was definitely good times, and I was doing random World Cups, and again, lots of woulda, coulda, shouldas. St. Anne over the bars, and then back on the bike and finished 6th. And Kavarik was sort of my, I suppose, rival at that time at the Norbas, and he won that World Cup at St. Anne, but I'd had an over the bars, and just again downhill, so frustrating.
Yeah.
As soon as I started to care again and really try hard, then started throwing away the race runs again.
So that that 01 season, you joined Maxxis. That's on Intense at that point, isn't it?
It was on the Intense M1, such a great bike.
Yeah,
really.
That was the bike at that stage. Like multiple race teams of different brands just running rebadged M1s, and that would have been like the Fifth Element shock and that on them at that point. Or maybe you guys were still Fox. You guys might have been Fox.
Yeah, it was a Fox shock on that. Yeah, for us, but yeah, great bike. And then 2 years on that. So on that bike for 2 years. We were Rock Shocks. I wasn't known as a good tester. I was they actually joked about me on a podcast but that's right, because I was so impatient, and I'm pretty well full ADHD. In a lot of ways, and so I just wanted to go and like smash runs out.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, how did that feel?" And I said, "I don't know. It felt all right." And then they would laugh at me because I'd bring a fork in, and then they said, "Did you realise there were broken shims and everything in this?" And was it even working properly? I'm like, I don't know. It just I was just smashing out.
It was
runs.
still going up and down.
Going
Like
up
it's
and down.
fine.
Yeah, so I wasn't on the black box test list for very long.
I'm like, we're not going to keep you on here.
That's what it was called back then, was black box. Yeah.
So those bikes were incredible. So you went on 01 and 02, won the title. I mean, did you have good bonuses like for the titles?
I think it was a $10,000 US bonus.
Yeah,
and then we had magazine back then. It was like photo bonus. So
yeah, and especially because you had the likes of Mountain Bike Action and that, which would always have race coverage, and a bunch of others. So I'm sure you probably pull a few good bonuses out of those too.
Yeah, and the really cool magazine out of the UK called Dirt.
Yeah.
So
Iconic.
there were good bonuses from that. So that year probably all ended up earning around 60,000 US.
Yeah.
I guess 60, 70,000 US, and then converted to Kiwi dollars. I think my best years were about 160, 170k US.
And like,
so at 24, 25, it was pretty good.
and I mean, especially now when you consider that, with like inflation to these days, like there's a lot of people that aren't making that level of money at this point. And still with the size of the sport at this point. So,
and you sort of, I wish there were more. And everyone's always quite secretive about it, but that's why I think, and thanks for asking, Kieran, because I don't care. I want people to know if you're intrigued.
Yeah.
And just you can know how much.
I think that's the thing. It's like kind of where I was at that stage, watching the racing. You sort of think like, man, these guys. You don't know, but you think like, I mean, what you were making was really good, but you sort of like, you never know. You're like, are they making $250,000 sort of thing? You got no idea, but it's no. I think it's interesting. I think people find it fascinating to kind of know, and I guess it's harder. It's like we can't exactly go talk to Sampling and Sop or someone right now and be like, well, how much money you're making. It's not something they want to share. But I mean, you've been nearly 18 years retired now, which I mean feels like a scary thought because I still do a lot of downhill racing now, and we were racing together 18 years ago, so it makes me feel old. But it's super interesting anyway, just to kind of hear, and especially those other little bits and pieces like, with that Sprite ad and that sort of thing that you were pulling in on the side as well. So then we kind of ended up, I guess you had your 2 titles on Intense, and then you guys moved on to Turners, right?
Yeah, that's right, Turners. And then I think that the Maxxis team too was also really low key.
Yeah.
And so that worked for me. So there was myself, Colin Bailey, and April Lawyer, and Kashi was on for a year, I think, cross country 1 year, maybe 2.
Oh, really?
But he sort of did his own thing and did the World Cups, and
Yeah.
then he would come and join us for the odd Norba.
Okay.
But it was predominantly just Colin, April, and myself.
Yeah.
And our mechanic was Ed Chavez
Ah, yeah.
for those 2 years.
Yeah.
He went on after 2 years to be the Haro mechanic.
With Minar and McKenna
Yes.
and that.
Yeah, and then our mechanic was the famous Monk Dog.
Monk Dog, yeah. What a time. I mean, that dude was such a character. That must have been pretty good times with him around.
Oh yeah, we got did a lot of driving, and so the way to save money, and when we had time, is I would drive in the team trucks,
Yeah.
and we would tank of gas on, tank of gas off, and you just lie down and sleep in the back of the truck.
Yeah, do like a 6 or 7 hour stint, whatever a tank of gas got you through, and
Yeah. Monk, rest in peace, buddy, but he didn't have the best diet, and so
No.
he would live on Mountain Dew and Hot Pockets and
Yeah.
things, and he'd put the Hot Pocket on the dash of the truck and let it warm up.
gross.
But we were going through Detroit one early morning, like in traffic actually. So luckily we're just going slow, and we'd both fallen asleep. And we woke up to the rig, and it's a 35-foot trailer,
Yeah.
and a dually 350 dually truck. We were grinding on the guardrail, like
Jeez.
luckily on the studs of the big, like the front wheels. They
yeah.
got big lug nuts.
Yeah.
And it was the lug nuts, the only thing that got damaged, because they were grinding on the guardrail. We
Holy
both woke
shit.
up, Monk had fallen asleep, but I don't know how we didn't die, because you see rigs off the side of the road in the desert upside
Yeah.
down from people falling asleep, or
It's too easy over there. They're like the just big, long, straight, monotonous roads, and
Monk was classic.
yeah, I could only imagine. I mean, we could probably sit here for hours and tell stories about
Yeah.
Monk Dog and road trips, because I could imagine there would
Yeah.
be more than one story. But yeah, he was. I mean, I didn't spend much time around him, but man, he was classic. He was such good value and just such a character.
Great person. Ed Chavez the same. He's like a brother, really.
Yeah.
They just they treated you like family. Like their riders were like their family.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, you had quite a good stint with Maxxis. So it was 5 years all up
It was,
till
yeah, it was 5.
retirement.
It was, yeah. And I just stayed with them and didn't really try and look elsewhere, because the owners, the Taiwanese, very, I think, loyal people as well.
Yeah.
I couldn't really get better money out of them, but I probably could have kept riding for them for another 5 years.
Yeah.
They would have. They just, they were good. They're loyal, and the staff at headquarters in Georgia,
Yeah.
for the mountain bike division.
Was Gary? Gary was he the team manager
Yes,
at that point?
Gary was,
Yeah.
Gary and his little sidekick Adam.
Yeah, Adam. Yeah.
They lived
Remember
in
Adam.
Colorado. They were from Colorado. So
Yeah.
the team we had a team manager for a year or two, and and then we took, they took on the cross country pros, Jeff Kabush
Yeah.
and Matthew Toulouse. And Jeff Kabush was winning just about everything.
Yeah, he was
super dominant.
Really dominant at that
So
point.
The team changed a little bit, but not. It was still a great team.
Yeah. I mean, they were really cool, and I think probably from the benefit of you being on the team, they were also really cool with Kiwis. They would always. I mean, it was kind of probably towards the end of when you were there, but I'd always go and hang out. I'd help them put up the tent and that sort of thing with the trailer, and they'd be chucking me tires out the back
Yep.
door of the trailer and that sort of thing. So they were always super cool and really helpful on that side too, which was good.
Yeah, those factory teams. I mean, even back then, some of them are just a closed door.
Yeah. There's some that they don't want to talk to you.
No,
They don't want to know who you are.
That's right. The small fringe teams are where the fun and where the help can be had. Coming back to Turner bikes, the first year again, it was hard getting used to that bike. I was
Quite different.
Yeah, and I was pushing hard. I wanted slacker head angle, and Dave Turner was he was really sort of hanging on to what he believed was right.
It's funny how many people there are, bike frame designers like that. I mean, it's changed a bit these days, but it's like from those days where these guys were just like, nope, this is what the head angle should be, and they just didn't want to listen to the riders.
Yeah, it was BB height and head angle, and I mean, I wasn't an amazing tester, but I just knew that those two things were key. Have the BB as low as you possibly can without getting too much pedal strike.
Yeah.
And have that head angle, as slack as you can without it, pushing.
Were you drilling the swing arms to slacken them out at that? We were.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. That's
That was
right.
that was the iconic Turner trick, and then it would start cracking the swing arms in that same spot as well.
Yeah, so there was the there was a new kid on the block. I mean, there was plenty of fast people on the block, but then a well-known Greg Menard turned up on the Norba series.
As the skid starts showing up.
Yep, and then there goes John's season dominance.
Well, because it's funny, I guess that would have been on Haro, really, at that point. But then
1 year, and then he was on the Honda program.
yeah, because that Honda program, like we did a podcast with them a while ago, and it was the funniest. It's funny when you look at it now because Honda was focused on the US when that was the Norba series was kind of fading off at that point, and it was kind of a crazy time for Honda to be like, this is where we're focused on, and like the couple of World Cups he won on that bike, so it's like probably should have shifted their focus elsewhere, but
yeah, and nowadays it would just be obviously full World Cup, but yeah, that was I mean it's you've got to believe in yourself, and I probably just went, man, it's going to be hard to beat this guy.
Yeah,
he was very talented.
Yeah, for sure.
And like again, possibly my ADHD, but I was kind of like, I knew that I wanted to do full World Cups, but Maxxis wouldn't pay for full World Cups. I was getting a bit, I suppose, like bored of the Norbas.
Because at that point you were a good 10 years or so of racing them. 8
or 9 years of it. And so I was like, ready, I want to do full World Cup seasons, but I wasn't. I'm always kind of a little bit of a planner, and I'm always looking to the future, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. But I was just like, well, if I spend my money, I can't like buy a house or buy a second. Like I had bought a house in Wellington early 2000s, and then I wanted to buy another one, and then I'm like, well, if I do the World Cups, I can't buy the second house, and so I took the financial, future planning versus the. I
guess it's at that point too where you're going, well, like, do I spend the money? Maybe the World Cups go good. Maybe I make more. Maybe I get back. But then you're probably also going, do I want to end up on this big factory World Cup team again? Yeah,
it's you're sort of gambling with your own sporting future, and I think I would probably tell if I'm giving advice to a younger rider, I would say to them, take the gamble and give it everything you got.
Bet on yourself.
Yeah, because you got years to do that other stuff.
And like what sort of? I mean, I guess you retired in 2006. How old were you at that point?
30, right? 30.
So that was kind of probably a conscious decision. Like, I'm 30. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I just again, I gotta be careful what I say, but I just I didn't want to be one of those guys hanging around collecting a paycheck when I couldn't be in top 5 or top 10. I just I thought I want to finish on my terms. I want to finish a top rider. Yeah. And pass my ride on to someone else coming through. Yeah,
and I mean that worked out pretty cool because it ended up being Cam Cole that basically took that spot, which again, it was that jump start for another, amazing Kiwis future of racing downhill.
I sort of did a similar thing with Nathan to Foes. Yeah. So when I left Foes, I went, well, look here, grab Nathan. He's fast, and then so Cam Cole, I got him to come over.
He did Sea Otter.
Sea Otter, that's right, and rode like my backup bikes. And
he did. I remember him doing like super well in the slalom. I think that year, It must have been the start of 2006. It was the year he won Worlds.
That's right, it was start of 2006, and he was solid in the downhill because he's big and strong. It suited him as well. I did well at Sea Otter because you had to have power. For the DH because it's pretty much
just a small bike. Trail
track. Sprint track. It was good, and I think I was just ready to challenge myself with something else. And do something else, which went on the first year and a half was so hard.
I could imagine. I mean, you're not the first person that I've talked to that said that when you come out of like just you kind of you're on your own schedule, you're training, you're riding, you're racing, and then all of a sudden you're like, geez, I got to go to work for the foreseeable future of my life now.
Pretty much have been my own boss for 10 years. Did what I wanted to do. And then I was at work at 7 on a building site. And, I mean, I was hating it, to be honest. I mean, I still worked with great people. I had a great boss. But I was hating being on the clock, and it wasn't my time. Yeah.
Well, I know Justin Leov went through the exact same thing when he quit racing downhill. Same thing. He went in, he was building, same thing. Like, he just hated it. And then he reignited his career racing enduro and did amazing at that. And then I think that kind of, he scratched that itch and he did super well at that, kind of extended his career, and then he went, okay, now, now I'll go back to doing the other stuff. So it's I mean, you still had a pretty incredible. So 2006, that was my first season racing. So that was your last season. That was my first season racing in the US. So I was riding for Foes. Again, I was so stoked with that ride because again, it was like following on from you and Nathan and. But yeah, that was pretty cool because I got to see. I got to spend a bit of time with you and your wife Cody and that over that time. But you still won US Open that year.
I did actually.
So you went out like you're saying, you didn't want to be collecting a paycheck, but you still had some awesome results in you.
I did, yeah, and I wasn't consistent anymore. I sort of was a little bit on and off, but yeah, the speed was still there. And even at Worlds, I think I qualified third or fifth, I think. And I just all the pressure came down on me, and I went, this is my last race, and I just rode basically with the brakes on. Yeah. I was a bit beat up. I'd had my ankles were hammered from 4-cross, so I raced 4-cross as well at Worlds.
That's right, yeah.
And that got robbed on that one.
You got robbed. I'll go to the grave saying you got robbed on that. You were in the course, that outside passes. Yeah. Still, I can still picture it.
But had the crowd on their feet and roaring. But it was that was pretty epic. But so I was a bit beaten up at Worlds, but I just rode tight. Yeah. And I think I got about 20th or 24th on the day. But yeah, speed was still there, and that's what I think I wanted. I wanted to, and I was ready. It's hard being a Kiwi racing in the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. I believe it's a lot easier if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. You're only flying 2 or 3 hours. You can go home regularly. It's we're the underdogs for sure coming from down here. Yeah,
100%. I mean, I think though, I loved my time in the US, and obviously you really enjoyed your time there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spent that much time racing there. And I actually had a really good catch up with Clay Harper, who ran the US Open in those days. He's running the Pro Downhill Series now. Just a few days ago, we actually were talking about you because he was like, "Oh man, JK, because he's I think a little bit younger than you, so he's kind of talking about the legend of JK as well." But we were talking about the fact of the US is actually so much easier for a Kiwi, an Aussie, South African to kind of get to and race. There's no language barriers. It's closer and that and. I think it'd be really cool to see that series get back up into that level again, which I think it's looking like it's on that way.
I hope so. I really do. I think that possibly with the way World Cups are going, it might actually help build the Continental Series more. And then it would be great if the US Series builds again. It's such a great place for Kiwis to go because the Americans love Kiwis, their work ethic.
They embrace you,
they embrace you for sure.
Yeah, that was sort of our whole discussion was just about, what they're doing, the fact that it can get back to, it has the potential to get back to being that big level of racing, I think, because there's going to be the way the World Cup Series, even just to get there and go race next year, 2025, it's so much more restricted and people are going to have to go somewhere because there's going to be so many talented riders just sitting around going, what do I do? I can't race World Cups, so... Yeah. If the US has got a home for them, it could be the next,
and then hopefully manufacturers go, let's throw together a team, and it could hopefully build from there. And then I think it would be, just imagine it would be just so much easier for a bunch of Kiwis to get together or go on, go and ride and race in the US.
And I think for me, it's you hit the nail on the head with the manufacturers thing, because you think back to when you were racing and there was all these, it's a little bit different now, but you had all these kind of brands like Turner and Intense and Foes and Ellsworth and Santa Cruz, and they all had teams based in the US. And I mean, now you've still got massive brands like Trek, and there's so many US based brands that could just pull together a race team.
Yeah, Pivot, you got Transition.
Yeah, exactly.
Forbidden. I mean, all these great companies that
And ultimately, I'd have to think a massive portion of their sales are in the US, so why not spend the marketing money where your sales are? So I hope it comes back around because it's a cool place to go and race. There's some amazing venues.
You got to love riding rock.
Yeah.
So
I think I was a bit like you. I like super dry, dusty, rocky. That was I think that was why I kind of fell in love with racing in the US as well.
Yeah, and often the races you've got to be good at carrying momentum. A lot of the tracks, there are steep tracks, but often when it's dry and dusty, steep tracks get destroyed. Right? They just blow out past being able to race them.
Deer Valley just falling to pieces and no, it's pretty cool. So that you kind of touched on World Champs in 2006. that was probably actually quite a nice way for you to finish your career as well, with World Champs being, I mean, right here we're sitting in Rotorua at the moment. Home soil, home crowd, like, yeah, what a way to just go, like,
Yeah.
drop the mic and
Yeah, it was pretty much, yeah. And another thing that it was, the Norba series was really pretty down then.
Lost it.
So like we were at it was a pretty random venue and a pretty neat venue, not far from Vegas, but it's the highest ski resort. I forget the name.
Brian Head, Utah.
So
Yep.
I was on the podium, I think second for slalom.
Yeah, Emil Cavalier beat you in slalom, and I was like, you should have just let him win. It was like, I think that was one of the last rounds or something that year.
Yeah, and I was standing on the podium, and I was looking in front of me, and there was my mechanic. There was Monk, sorry, and there was Cody,
Yeah.
and there was one photographer, and I think it might have been Schwinn.
Yeah.
And there were 3 people there, and I'm like, oh man, the series
This is
dead.
over.
This is over.
Yeah.
So
I broke my hand the week prior to that race. So I didn't race that one, but yeah, I was there watching. So it was kind of fading pretty bad by that point.
yeah, and unfortunate timing for yourself. in a
Yeah.
way, you know.
Yeah, if only I'd been 10 years older at that point or something, but I still had a good few years over there anyway. It was still bounce. I sort of did a similar bit, bounce back and forth between the World Cups, and
Yeah.
so no, it was always a good time. So after you retired, you were saying you went into building, and
Yeah, so I'd started an apprenticeship prior to finishing racing. So
Yeah.
when I'd come home and I was living in Wellington during the summer, it just kind of it actually reignited my want to ride and race. So I'd come home and I'd work for a neat guy named Aaron Kerr and Kerr Construction, and I would train after work or on the weekend, and I just I went back feeling fresh, ready to race. And if I hadn't have done that, I possibly, so it got that building apprenticeship going. So when I finished racing, I essentially only had sort of a year and a half to go.
also at that point you would have been late 20s, and you've got a massive base behind you. You don't need to be training 3 times a day, so you could probably just dial that back and kind of live a bit more of a normal life and do the important training that you needed to.
Yeah, I did put a big emphasis on, especially through I did quite a lot of gym stuff, and stretching. I didn't look after myself post injury, but luckily I didn't actually have too many bad injuries. But I had lots of those niggles and ligament tears and bruising and things. But gym was huge. It was a big part of my training, and just so I could take the hits.
Yeah.
Basically, muscle is body armor.
I think that's still a pretty key point in downhill these days. I think it gets a little bit lost as so many people just, turning into pro roadies and being lean.
And you got to be careful. You don't want to be too bulky, but you need to be tough, and you need to be stretchy and tough. And so, I dialed that back a bit because I was on a building site, so I wasn't going to the gym 3 or 4 days a week.
Yeah.
But I was still doing what I needed to do. So finished my building apprenticeship, and I moved to Taupo and finished it there actually, and then just still was like, I just wasn't handling being on a building site, and I'm like, I've got to get a business. I've got to get something for myself. I need to be my own boss again. And just sort of by just knowing someone and by chance, and they bought the window business, the window factory.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's sort of still where what you've ended up in these days. So
still own the majority of that business in Taupo. It's an L-therm factory, which is great. We switched to purchasing from and building the L-therm product in 2017.
Okay.
They're a great, but APL is the company in Hamilton. Great company and more aligned with how I operate and the way I want to run a business. So.
At some point, talking of running businesses, I mean, actually, this was kind of something I needed to go back to earlier on. Matt Whitaker, who now these days owns Wide Open. You and him started Wide Open together, right?
Yes, very grassroots, very small with ODI grips.
Yeah,
just through the common contact.
I remember buying a pair of ODI grips. I can't remember whether it was from you or Matt. At a Rotorua National round out of a bag in like maybe 2003.
Yeah, that would be right.
Yeah, and I was like, it was my first pair of lock-on grips, and I was so pumped I put them on right before race runs and could barely hold on because I think I'd gone from just totally different grips. And it's still something I remember. I'm like, I don't know, 15 or something at this point, but So yeah, you guys started right there with ODI, which is it's awesome. I mean, a brand that's still probably a key part of the business to this day.
Yeah, and so I think we were in it together for maybe 2 years tops, and I was still racing, and I was not. Matt and Alice were pretty committed to it.
Yeah.
Running it out of their home still, but they came to me and said, "Hey, look, can we buy you out?" And I sold out with a tiny amount, but sold out to them, and that's been their baby ever since.
Yeah, built an incredible brand out of it. So Matt, was he your mechanic at Foes?
So Matt, yes, for the first year when we got a bit more serious. So that's in 1998.
Right. Yeah, because I'd always wondering where, because I knew he'd spent some time at Foes between you and like Nathan Rankin and that, but I wasn't sure where he'd actually come in. So did you bring him in?
Yes, I talked to. I remember who I asked in Wellington. I knew of Matt because he raced in the open men's class at Nationals, and knew he's from Wellington. He's a rider and a mechanic, and so I just put the word out that I was looking for a mechanic to come over.
Okay, yeah. So you didn't even have like some pre-existing relationship. It was just like come on over.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was great. It worked out.
Yeah.
Matt's consistent and level-headed, and he went on to manage and run that team with Alice for a number of years.
Yeah, they was there for a while, wasn't he?
5 years, 6 years maybe, or longer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's funny how intertwined a lot of the stuff kind of comes around and where it all started out. I've got some random questions that I haven't prompted you on, so I probably should have given you some of these, but favourite bike of all time?
Oh, hell, favourite bike of all time. I mean, the no-brainer is to go the Intense M1 from back then. That's, without thinking of bikes that I've had recently, that's probably the most memorable.
Yeah. You don't have any of those old M1s?
I do have one.
Do you still have an M1?
Yeah,
that's
so I sold it to a friend, Matt Farr from Wellington.
Yeah.
And because the money was too good back then.
Yeah.
I mean, we just sell a downhill bike, and
it was part of your salary basically in those days.
It was part of income, and then so he rode it for a few years, and then I bought it back off him. So I've got that. It's a little bit beat up.
Is it like silver frame, the big Maxxis
silver
decal
frame,
on
the big
it?
Maxxis decal?
Oh, that's pretty cool because you've still got one of your turners as well, don't you?
And then I kept the last turner from 2006,
cool.
and that's like in pretty mint condition.
Yeah. I remember looking at that. It was at Crankworks a few years ago, and I spent like probably about 20 minutes just looking over everything on it because it's still, I don't know, that stuff's still cool to me. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
and I have, I don't know if I can be bothered restoring it, but I've got a front and rear end and the shock for RM9.
Oh no way!
Yeah.
Oh man.
So that could be someone who's avid vintage restorer could do that. But
could be a project. Yeah, I think the M1's probably. Yeah, I mean those were super cool at that point. I mean they were pretty trick bikes. So
and they're just easy to ride fast.
Yeah. I've also got a photo somewhere that I took of. It must have been 2001, and you had an M1, and I think it had like. The boxes had flames painted on them or something.
Yeah.
You raced the National Series on that. I've got a photo I took, like an actual photograph that I took of your bike. I wasn't even racing that year, and I've got that sitting at home somewhere. So that's another bit of JK memorabilia I've got around.
Those forks, they belong to someone else.
Were they on one of Petey's bikes or something?
Possibly, yeah. They came from like just RockShox stuff that they had that they grabbed some parts and put together some stuff.
I feel like I remember seeing Petey with them on something at some point, so that's pretty funny. Do you have a favourite racetrack or venue, over the years, somewhere that really stands out?
Yeah, I did love Vermont.
Yeah.
That was
Mount Snow was
Mount
awesome.
Snow, Vermont, it was really fast, big slab rock, bit of off camber. And had good results there, and so that's a good place memory wise. I always loved Mont Saint Anne.
Yeah,
and I wasn't a Norba; it was a World Cup, but just had a lot of mechanicals and bad luck there.
I think I'm the same there. I've had terrible luck at Mont Saint Anne, but it was such a cool place. It was just such a cool place to go to and cool track and
brutal place, but such an epic place as well. Yeah, I mean, I have great memories. Deer Valley, Utah is another good spot.
It's also one of my favourites, one of my most memorable.
Mammoth Mountain, I mean, you've got to, once you learn to ride the kitty litter, because it literally is like riding a kitty litter.
Yeah, I rode there once, and I remember it just being the most bizarre feeling.
Yeah, like sand, like you're just surfing, and a lot of you're surfing, and really.
Different to anything else for sure. Best teammate.
Best teammate. I would say, I mean, absolutely, it's got to be Colin Bailey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Colin seems like a character.
He is a character. Yeah. He was definitely a lot more analytical and would work through things. And
I mean, he designed the Maxxis Minion.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic tires.
Yeah. And I think he would just laugh at me and go, "You're just such a mongrel," you know. So yeah, but so it was. Yeah, there was a great teammate.
Yeah.
And so was April. I mean, great memories with April always. She was a great teammate as well.
Yeah, I remember April a little bit. She came out. She maybe a couple of summers. She came out here, I think, and did some racing.
Yeah, she did.
So,
that's right.
Yeah. No, it was a cool time, that team. We talked on the Super Bowl ad or the Sprite ad. I got that in there. We kind of touched on it a bit, but I think you kind of answered it. But would you have liked to have raced more World Cups? Like I think you kind of said, if you're going back now, you probably would have bet on yourself more.
For sure, yeah. If I knew, because I didn't really have any help along the way. I was just all self-directed, and I did ask Hendy for a little bit of advice. I was younger, just what do you think I do with this? But there was no one else to ask.
Yeah, there was no one really. I mean, Hendy before you, but there
there's
wasn't
not a lot of people before, that have paved the way. And then some for better or good, I'm in my head probably too much. Thinking about things and worrying about things, whatever. So doing it all over again. I wish I could have done more World Cup seasons.
Yeah.
And there were lots of blow-on opportunities at World Cup races, even the ones that I had done.
So you had a World Cup. No, you didn't have a World Cup podium, did you?
No, six. I had a few six, and there were
man.
6 with crashes too.
Yeah.
That's what was so gutting.
Yeah.
Consistent top 10s.
Yeah.
Caprone.
I saw you had 6 top 10s. I went back
okay.
and I had a look through the history books. So yeah.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't. Yeah, well, I'm about right. I knew I had a few top 10s. Yeah.
Biggest deal you turned down? Did you have anything you ever turned down?
No, I didn't get any big deals. No, I mean,
sounds like you probably were never really chasing them. I guess at that point, maybe you once you got that Maxxis sort of.
And because I was more of a series racer. I wasn't like a winner. I won a round at and I love West Virginia where they race World Cups for many years.
Snowshoe.
Yeah. I love that track, and I won there. But I was the seconds and thirds and fourths and fifths.
Yeah.
And I got to the stage in my career in that for 2000, 2001, 2, 3. I just knew I'd be on the podium.
Yeah.
So coming into race week, I'd just be like, just have fun and practice. Just relax, but I didn't hang it all out there and try and go for the win all the time, and it sort of wasn't my style.
Yeah, and I guess like you were saying, you were on the podium a lot in those days with the Nikos, PDs, Cedric, so it's kind of like they were fantastic results, but you were also being overshadowed a bit by these
always so many fast
high top level World Cup races coming in.
Yeah, there was Mick, who was on the scene then too, and Kavarik, they were incredibly fast. Ian, Nathan, Rennie. Greg, there's so many fast riders and great riders that it was great to be in the mix, but I probably a bit of self-doubt, I suppose, instead of going into the weekend going, I'm going to win. I would just be like, oh shit, he's here.
But then you were always notorious for winning practice.
Oh, yeah.
There were always, everyone, it was always the JK's just wide open in practice.
And because I knew the clock wasn't on me and I'm having fun, and I liked being a show off, I think. So I would like to walk the track, do one roll run and then just hit everything. Yeah. And then the gnarliest rock garden just come in, especially when heaps of people were watching. I'd just come in there just absolutely tapped. Yeah. And annihilate it, and then
off like a hero.
Yeah, and then come race run, I'd come in there and a couple of brake taps and be like, shit, don't crash.
Yeah.
Ruin your run, and then I would never do it the same. But I definitely, I had that reputation of winning practice, and I think I fed off the hype of it.
Yeah, because it's as soon as people are talking about doing that, it's a nice little ego boost for the weekend as well.
Yeah, and what wasn't cool though about that was so many times people around the pits would be like, oh man, John's he's going to win. He'll win. Have you seen how quick he did? We timed him, we got splits, he's going to win, and then I'd be 5th in the race or 7th or something, and then I was let down because I'd got my hopes up, but as soon as the clock came on, I just would tighten up.
I'm pretty sure this is true. You had a superstition of running blue goggles.
I definitely had a superstition of new gloves and new goggles.
Okay.
So if I wore a pair of goggles, I'd try and look after them, or they'd go back in the bag. But no, I didn't have a blue goggle superstition,
okay.
but it was definitely tight new gloves.
Maybe I've made the blue thing up, but
yeah,
I remember there was something to do with goggles.
It's the scent of the new goggles.
Yeah.
So
you can't beat a fresh pair of goggles.
There's
to
no
smell
way
it.
I was putting on a sweaty pair of goggles. And while we're talking about I love racing in a skin suit. I've said it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean,
so what are the top riders riding in right now? They're racing in skin suits.
Well, I mean that Fox Speed suit that they've been running this year, it's just a skin suit.
So it was an era thing, and I get why we went to baggies, but baggies were shit for racing, and you can't feel where your body's at.
Nah.
It's all flapping around, and then after a season of baggies, everyone was not using pins, and I remember even Greg was having his top all pinned up, and everything was all pinned up tight. So there's a reason performance athletes wear tight clothing, because you perform better.
I mean, you look at anything, you look at the evolution of rugby and what they've gone from wearing these big, heavy cotton tops to super tight fitting athletic tops. And it's a progression.
When you're humming trees or buzzing trees, within, centimeters, you want to know where your body's at.
I remember racing Fort William World Champs in 2007. So we raced those. We were in skin suits at that point, and that track was a skin suit track. Was for sure. That was so fast, and you could feel the speed.
Yep.
That you were just this incremental speed that you would pick up from not flapping around, because it was get super windy there as well.
Yep.
Did you come to that as a team manager?
I did. So I was team manager,
07
coach.
and 08.
It was when Scalzi got third.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And then Cody and I ran the team at the first year at Val de Sol.
Yeah, we were at Val de Sol as well.
And then I was a coach at sort of jointly at the Canberra round.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I enjoyed that. I just tried to really instill in the riders that I knew had a chance of, like Scalzi getting third in juniors. I just tried to instill confidence and calmness.
Yeah. No, it was, I remember those days, because it was sort of my peak performances, and it was cool to have you around, because you were just this presence of, downhill greatness to a certain extent, and it was great to have that knowledge and wisdom kind of base of the year, which was cool. And we raced skin suits at Val de Sol as well, which was insane. But they were fast there.
You probably didn't really need one there.
Nah. But I got 13th there. It was my best ever result at that one. So that was it was a good one.
Juniors.
No, that was elite.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's solid.
Yeah, that was good. I beat Nathan Rennie. No, maybe it was Kavarik was 14th. I was one of those guys behind me, and I was like, yes, that was. So that was a cool
listeners, that's a solid result.
Yeah.
Looking back for Kieran.
No, that's one of mine. So, I turned up at your house, and met your kids, and I've seen them over the years, but it's the first time I've seen them, since they've kind of got pretty big these days. But they're riding and racing now. We had quite a good chat about that. You were just talking about the fact that the whole family was on podiums at the 2W Enduro last weekend. How cool is that, having the kids coming through? And
yeah, it's so fun. We introduced them to bikes early, but neither of the kids really have been what I would say really super keen on it.
Yeah,
we would just come over to Rotorua and do the kids loop, and then get them some treats afterwards, and just try and always keep it fun.
Yeah.
And then 2 years ago, we did a family trip to the US and rented a motorhome and did a month traveling around, visiting family of Cody's and tying in some other family stuff and seeing friends and riding them.
Yeah.
And, we rode not the whole of the whole Enchilada Trail in Moab, but we cut out the big climb and started just after that. But, our kids back then were 8 and 11.
Yeah.
And they did well. It's a long, and that was a 5-hour ride of mostly descending, but finishing in like 100+ degree heat.
Yeah.
And
My oldest boy's 7, and I can't imagine getting him out for that many hours of riding at this stage.
You'd be surprised what they do,
Yeah.
but we pumped them up, and
Yeah.
we did, but so they've gotten keener, and my daughter Charlie, she's getting keener, and I just last weekend I said, I'd be great if we get a photo because we're all racing, and then we ended up the kids were third, and Cody and I were first. So it was
That's
a
awesome.
great day.
That's so cool.
Yeah, sorry, Byron. Gotcha.
No apologies to Byron. But actually, it's funny because like maybe a lot of people don't realize, but your wife Cody, like she was racing through that time in the US as well. Like she was a really solid rider back then.
Yeah, she was. She started really late with bikes, but she had a background of a lot of other sport, and she's just a tough nugget, you know. So she was sending it and doing things, and so she won like the expert class in the US at nationals, and then turned pro. I met her at the start of her first pro season in 2005. And then she was just part of the Maxxis team, really, not riding in the Max on our gear, but she was sponsored by Chumbawamba.
That's right. Yeah.
And she finished 6th, I think, in the Pro Women's Nationals, 6th or 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was, I think I forced her into retirement, unfortunately.
You're like, I'm finished, so you're coming with me.
But she was already kind of going, this is not fun like it used to be, because the pressure to hit the big features. And so she was kind of also going, man, is this worth it? And she was pretty much covered in bruises from top to bottom after every round.
Yeah, I've feel like I've got a memory of her just having a huge crash at, I think it might have been at that Brian Head race we were talking about, somewhere like that. I feel like I remember seeing her just head to toe covered in dust and dirt. But
that'd be right. Yeah, she took some hits, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that's been an incredible trip down memory lane. Have you got any words of wisdom that we can, leave anyone listening that might be aspiring?
Well, I'm just looking at how I see it now. Downhill particular is it's going like pro motocross.
Yeah.
So like there's always exceptions to the rule in what age you can start at. But I think now if you haven't started by 9 or 10, really start, like it's going to be hard for you to become pro and to be able to, to be able to compete. It's
definitely, that's an interesting kind of, I guess like you'll be facing it now because your kids are right around that age, but it's that sort of internal battle of like how much effort do you want, or how much, not pushing them into it, but how much do you want them to dive in at this point while they're that young to then maybe burn out by the time they're 14, 15, or it's a very finite balance, I think.
I think it is, yeah. And so I've got a whole, I can get a little bit racer daddish at times, and I'm trying to. And Cody, she's quick to remind me. And our kids are strong minded, and they're going to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But my son, he does say to me, Cohen, he says, "Hey, I want to be a pro downhiller like you, Dad." And I said, "Well, that's awesome. We got to keep it fun.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to do the work because there's a lot of competition."
Yeah, and I think that competition is just growing because it's like mountain biking is bigger than it's ever been, really. Like the amount of people that are recreationally riding, the amount of kids they're getting at like secondary school nationals and that now, it's like that depth of talent is pretty big at this point.
That's right. And so then the next level of what, say giving advice to an older rider going overseas, I think the sooner you can work out how you operate. Do you operate under pressure? Do you operate without pressure? And it's just the sooner you can learn mentally how you work as a racer, then the sooner you'll do well, I think, because it's you only get so many chances. And if you're putting yourself under pressure and you're cooking it, and it's but there's lots of help out there now, I think, from people that like research and people that know, and for example Lewis here in town, Lewis Hamilton, just so much knowledge, and that's his job as business, and passing that on. When you were around as young, getting into it, there was definitely no such thing as a coach. But even when I was young, there was no one at that point either. Like it's pretty amazing the access that these younger kids can get to people like Lewis and that now, which is quite cool. Yeah, and then a real simple thing that I say to people is just find out whatever your weaknesses are. You got to work on those. Oh, that's and if you can't have any weak side to you, and then still sort of comes up like I don't really like to train hard or pedal hard, but I'm like, that's an easy part. You might as well be strong.
Yeah.
Because there will always be racetracks that require strength. So why not have it in your quiver of, in your arsenal, is be strong and be able to sprint.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's like over the course of a weekend, if you are strong,
And
like
fit,
that coming in with your fitness and that, it's all coming into favour when you get to race run because you're going to be
fresh.
fresher.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Yeah, it's all that conditioning is so important. Yeah.
well, this has been awesome. This has been, one for the book. Stoked we managed to catch up to do this. And, can't wait to see, Cohen and Charlie Kirkcaldie showing up in the result sheets and on podiums. We'll keep an eye out for them over the following years.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just make sure we have fun and out there as a family and travelling and camping and running a little race team.
Nice. That sounds great. Thanks, John.
Cheers, Kieran. Thanks.
What's up?
I come from the land of down under. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. What was that? I can't hear you. I let it be like John Lennon, the anti-serum that you don't get for poisonous venom. Read the label carefully, I'm only here for the show. I love hip-hop too much to let you feed my ego. In the key of F-U-C-K, Y-O-U. I mean, why do I owe you if you're not helping me through? I mean, why do I owe you if you're obstructing my view? Success is not my castle, just a house that's brand new. You see, I irrigate the culture, give it shape like a sculpture. Still complicated, rock like I'm supposed to. B-L-I-T-Z like my DJ. Rock to the rhythm like you rock to what he plays.